And there we are. It's actually live. We're on the air. I'm Alan Levine, and we are doing a Network Narratives studio visit with most of our students in New Jersey. We had a little bit of a mix-up here, and so we're trying to do something where everybody's on their laptop in class. There might be some crazy feedback. If possible, maybe if you guys can, before I introduce Brian, if you can say hello, practice unmuting your microphone. So I'll call on people. And I'll go first with Christina, because she's on my left. I don't know what order she's in on your computer. Christina, can you unmute and say hello?
Yep, hello. Hi.
Hi.
What else do I say?
What do you think of this class so far? Is it insane?
About as insane as the first time as I took it.
Okay. So. I thought it was more insane this time. All right. So feel free to jump in. Janet, can you say hello?
Hi.
And what do you think? Is class crazy?
Getting to hang out. I don't know. Working it out though.
They are. All right, and then over next to Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm sort of Dr. Zamора's fill-in with the tech stuff, though I didn't really figure it out. We're working with it. In the background over here, we have somebody else too. Want to say hi? No. All right, we're buddying up over here.
All right, that's Carol. All right, so Mary Kate, you want to try your mic or at least the wave so we know you're here? She's staring.
Hello.
Hey, your microphone works good. You're just being shy, right? And so, what do you think of Network Narratives so far?
It's interesting.
They're being very kind and guarded.
I'm guessing that.
We'll draw out the honesty. So now that Sarkan.
Fair enough. And is this a course? Did this iteration start like in January, or when did this? Okay.
Yeah, we've been going since third week in January. So let's see if we get. Sarkan was having some trouble with the mic. It might get some crazy feedback. I think.
Can you hear me?
Yep, that's good.
All right. Hello.
That's fair. He's reserved, but he's a brilliant blogger. I've really enjoyed reading his blog posts. And then nice. we have V, and I think you're with Shawnette, right?
Yeah. Hello.
Hi.
They're embarrassed by the feedback. Feedback is good, right, Brian?
I've bought albums of nothing but feedback.
All right, so I want to now. I should ask Brian to say something about himself because he is our guest, and I could do the big grand introduction. I said to him before that you've been on the internet as longer than me, which just makes us old.
Well, here's a little factoid that I like to talk about with Alan. My introduction to working and being a teacher on the internet was my first job was in Hermosillo, Mexico, which is a city. If you go to Tucson, you drive due south for about 300 miles into the desert. There's a pretty big city called Hermosillo. And my first job was there, and the internet was just becoming a thing. This was the late 90s. And by a thing, I mean high speed and being able to actually teach and do things online. Anyway, so I was trying to teach myself things, and this is when you kind of had to hand code a lot of things with HTML. And back then, people would write HTML tutorials and how-to guides. And I remember this one that I really liked. I thought it was the best one. It had the coolest colors, the clearest instructions, had a sense of humor. And I remember learning from it. And then about 2 or 3 years later, I was back in Canada. I was at a conference. I met Alan. We had similar interests. We became friends. And then about a year after I realized that we were hanging out, I was like poking through his website, and I found his old HTML tutorials. So he taught me how to use HTML before I even knew who he was. And that was more than 20 years ago.
Who cares about HTML anymore, right?
Yeah, it comes in handy sometimes.
And so what's your current work that you do?
So currently, I have a real job now. My job title is Director of the Learning Technology and Innovation Group at Thompson Rivers University. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating what I put on my little web bio, but I have a team of about 25 people outside my office door mostly. And we build fully online courses for our open learning group. So we have about 12,000 students online, 700 courses or so. And we also have a campus here. So that's a campus of about 12,000 students, and we do learning technology support for them. So we try to have some fun and do interesting things, but I must admit a lot of our stuff is just fixing things, tweaking grade books, debugging problems, helping people, find their courses and things like that.
So, what's the awareness of students there, sort of like on the state of the internet now, considering most of them, like these students, have grown up with it, always there. What do they think of it? Do they know?
So the gauge I'll use for that is here in British Columbia, we have pretty strict privacy laws. So theoretically, for example, if you wanted to use a tool like Google Hangouts with students and you had students log in with a Gmail account or you asked them to get a Gmail account and do basically what we're doing here, to follow the law, which I'll admit most instructors don't, but if you follow the law, you're actually supposed to do a privacy impact assessment and at the very least get the students to sign a consent form where you explain to them that their data is being collected and things might be. And the thing I find challenging with that is you're supposed to explain what will happen to the data and who knows, right? So I help in.
Nope. And who knows, we just lost our speaker. Well, hopefully that was just a little bit of a blip. That's like Google just cut him off. Like he was like saying, who knows what happens to the data? And so we'll give him a second to see what happens there. And hopefully, Google got him. Who is Google? Does anybody wonder about that? Has anybody, Google does email you a lot about, your privacy settings. And has anybody gone in to sort of look at the things where Google is able to show what information it has about you?
Sorry. Stupid VPN collapsed.
That was like really brilliant because you're talking about we have to be aware of Google having our data, and he goes poof.
Yeah, that's it. I'm not going to say what I said again because so that's where I died. Anyway, 3 years I was using a VPN, which is good for safety, but every now and then it causes me to lose my connections. So I'm in the wild now.
Are things too complicated now?
Well, to do a proper people say, can you come in and talk about web privacy for 5-10 minutes? I'm still don't know how to do that. Especially then I find when I do it quickly, that's when I become a real fearmonger. Because I think there is nuance here. But anyway, what I was going to say, I'll say it in fewer words. When I would do this with students 3 years ago, they usually didn't care and they'd sign anything. Whereas now they have, first of all, a lot of them know the issues when I'll say things like, do you know how Google generates revenue? And they'll say advertising and personal data, they didn't know that 3 years ago. 3 years ago, they'd say, oh, from their search engine, or they make money doing web services or whatever. So I think something has definitely shifted. And I think instructors are more concerned too. Some are.
So what's the scariest thing on the internet to you? What's the thing that really creeps you out?
Oh, I don't know. Let's go. Killer robots.
Robots?
I'm scared of the killer robots.
Are they in Kamloops?
Not as far as I know,
oh,
but
okay.
I just mean advances and things like drone and policing technology that involve robots and AI.
Yeah.
When you probably are all your room is going to kill you. I've got to talk to my landlord about her Roomba because I think she has it to do the vacuuming at 4 a.m, and it's right above my bedroom. Anyway, that's awesome.
That's a landlord issue, not a internet issue.
Well, yeah, maybe. So the yeah, I mean, that's one. I mean, I think the core issue is just how little we still know about what the biggest players in this field are doing. Like we still just, it seems like every day there's some new piece of news about some practice that Facebook or Google or Amazon's been doing for years, and you know, it just gets revealed, and then at first they deny it, and then 6 weeks later they admit it, and then nothing changes. So I think just that concentration. There was a really great series in Gizmodo where a writer, she set up a VPN to completely block anything from the big 5 kind of surveillance-driven companies. So Amazon, Facebook, Google. Who else am I forgetting? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Apple and Microsoft. And when she would like block Google, for example, it wasn't a question of just like, oh, now I got to use DuckDuckGo or get a different email client. Huge amounts of her other apps stopped working too, because they were all built on the Google infrastructure. So Uber stopped working. Spotify stopped working because they were all using. And when you think about how much of the internet's on Amazon Web Services right now, I just think that concentration combined with secrecy, and the fact that none of these companies have a very good record for ethics or honesty. Like that's the big issue in my view. And that's more than any one specific thing scares me. Although just today I was reading that Facebook is trying to patent actual literal mind reading technology. They call it WAND. So to actually, you think something and it'll appear on the screen, and they actually say they're working on it. That kind of freaked me out.
I can see like the big, you know, promo video now for like all the good things that it will do, right?
Well, in some ways it would be good.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing, is good and bad can be together. So like there's one that sounds like a joke, but the smart toilets are a thing. So, you know, and then there's the idea of the smart toilet. Some of it's comfort stuff. It'll heat the seat to exactly the way you want it. It'll know when you're coming in. You know, you can have the settings exactly as you want. And that's kind of, you know, whatever. But it will also analyze your stools and your urine. And this technology will save lives. Like what they're promising is, and I could believe them, like, for example, by doing this analysis, they'll be able to diagnose or at least provide a warning, say, of something like colon cancer extremely early, or other types of illnesses where, you know, it might take months before the symptoms rendered. That will save lives. But I think if we pay attention to how this stuff gets used, it'll also be sent to insurance companies, and you'll find that your insurance premiums went up because you ate pizza at 2 a.m. And as someone who's been known to eat pizza at 2 a.m, that kind of freaks me out.
If any kind of data should go to Mark Zuckerberg, I think it should.
Yeah, they haven't earned our trust. They haven't. I don't know how you could begin to make the case that they have.
You know, and I'm not going to defend them, but like we talk about our data like it's like a file in a folder somewhere. And so like, even if they were completely transparent, like, could we really understand?
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of mind boggling.
Yeah.
So I think we kind of move into like, you know, a creepy acceptance. Is that a viable way to be?
Yeah. Or is it kind of like just kind of paralysis that kind of is somewhere in between apathy and fatalism? I think honestly, that's where I spend a lot of my time. Mm-hmm. Like I'm rarely optimistic, but I don't spend my entire day in a panic, and I use the internet all the time. Mm-hmm. I have no sense of direction, and especially if I'm anywhere except my hometown, I need Google Maps. I mean, I can't function without it anymore. I don't know how I did for most of my life, but you know, So things like that. I mean, it's really hard to even, here we are on Google right now, and I have my Google account, and so I use it. So that makes me, I carry that around. I almost feel, fatalistic and carry a bit of, I don't know if guilt's the right word, self-loathing. Or just that sense that, oh, what can you do about it? It feels like climate change almost or something, like just such a vast, immensely big issue that's really hard for you to even understand, much less deal with. And it really depends on other people to help you deal with it.
Maybe we just need to get lost more often.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I think we had different attitudes about things like that for sure.
Yeah. And like Kelly says, like what's, we can't dial any of this back.
Mm-hmm.
And still like, what do we see looking forward to? Like, I mean, that there are some of the efforts that are going on in the European Union seem to be at least they seem important and significant, but at the same time, it's like relatively small in terms of the machine that we're living. Are we living in a matrix is the question.
Yeah. It's a really good point from Kelly there. I agree. I don't know if, I mean, to me, one of the more constructive things we can do is, and why it's good to talk about, and why I always accept invitations to talk about it, even though I don't pretend to be an expert. I mean, you've had Chris Gilliard and other people, join you. Like Chris knows so much more than I do. And then there are people who actually, have, experience in privacy law or, really understand the tech. I don't have any of those things, but I never turned down the opportunity to talk about it. And because partly I think we can't afford to let the experts, like we can't wait for someone else to solve this problem for us. And the other issue is, I think the only thing is casual people need to feel empowered to have an opinion and to say whether they feel comfortable with it. And that may lead to some sort of political action, which I don't think will solve the problem in itself. I agree. But it'd be a step. I mean, I'm encouraged that like there are candidates in the United States talking about breaking up Facebook using antitrust legislation. Like at least that's being talked about. It wasn't being talked about 4 years ago. That wasn't an issue. It wasn't a campaign issue 4 years ago. So it's a small thing, but I take some comfort in that.
All right, let's bring some light. Let's talk about animated GIFs. Why do they fascinate you, Brian?
Well, I think one reason why they fascinate me is they're one of the oldest things on the internet. Back when I was learning HTML from you, 3/4 of the websites in the world, and I hope our young colleagues on this call have seen these at least. Every website had this like little yellow worker and an under construction sign on it. That was an animated GIF. I mean, I just find it fascinating that one of the earliest media types has had this renaissance. And, 4 or 5 years ago, it was kind of a campy thing. Like I think when the early days of DS106, when the animated GIF was almost kind of like adopted as the emblematic media type of DS106. It was like the first exercise. I mean, I think before the course even launched, I remember everyone started making GIFs to kind of announce themselves. There was that kind of campy period, but now it's like it's so everywhere. It's a huge part of how media is done.
So like there's corporate GIFs.
Absolutely. I mean, actually, I think some of the best GIFs or GIFs. I go both ways on that. It feels smoother to say GIF for me. So sports, like sports writing and online sports, like it's such a perfect medium for that. But it's still a fun thing to do. I made 2 GIFs this morning to make fun of a friend online. I made 2 fresh GIFs, and it didn't take long.
So the ones, do you make the ones you share, or do you find the ones? Because you include them in every blog post and every presentation I've seen you do.
Yeah, I find a lot. There are a few people out there that are really good curators, and I frankly just hijack their collections all the time. There's this online radio station I love called WFMU, and their station manager, Ken Friedman, he would attach a GIF to every song that he played on the radio or and it's internet radio, and he'd have playlists, and he would try to create GIFs that had the same rhythm as the song. And he has really good taste. So I copy a lot of his, but I make them too. I make a lot of them too. I don't really make the really high end ones that you see where people mask things or, freeze the background and only have one thing moving. I mean, people who do that, that's to me like sorcery. I'm just like, how do you do that? Yeah. But I have a few tools. There are web-based tools that are good, like just even to take a YouTube video and make a clip. I use a tool on the Mac called GIF Brewery, which I think costs $20, which for me has been worth it. I use it a lot. It's essentially the same as the web-based tool, but it's more just got more features and more precision.
Like what do you know? Like if you could think of a moment where it says this is really appropriate for a GIF, like when does that? What's the thing that you feel or strikes you? And the GIF moment, I said it two ways as well.
Yeah, it's easy once you start. Good question. I mean, like in discourse or a joke or something. To me, it's just like a more expressive emoji, I guess, at times. And well, to give an example. We won't go into the details, but Alan and I have a mutual friend who's sick and is going through treatment. And every now and then he posts a little update. I couldn't think of anything better to do than like to show a picture of an animal doing something kind of funny, but kind of being sad. And because I didn't want to just be sad, I couldn't really think of any words. Like anything I'd say felt kind of insufficient or phony. So so just I hope he takes it the right way. That's the danger, like maybe he thinks it's weird I'm sending him funny animal GIFs when he's talking about his treatment. But to me, it's an expressive emoji. And then in the case, those GIFs to me, they say 2 or 3 things at the same time. Mm-hmm. It's a sad thing, but it's also, you're trying to be kind of a little bit funny. You're trying to cheer your friend up a little bit. So
sometimes it's easier to GIF than to get the right words. Is that?
In that instance, it is.
Yeah.
In that case, it definitely is. To take a less heavy example, we have somebody who will be starting here in the summer working with us as a faculty development person. And when she did her job presentation, she actually talked about using GIFs for assessment. In her classes, and like not like the grading so much, but if you're on the right track, or if you did something, if you can be encouraging, or maybe you can say try a little harder, or I'm confused. There's lots of ways to say that with a GIF. And she would do things too, like she'll just have check-ins where there's students, and she'll say, "So how prepared are you feeling for this exam on Friday?" Say it with a GIF. And if she sees a bunch of people posting GIFs of high fives and going, "You're awesome," then she knows they're in pretty good shape. If she sees lots of ones going, or whatever, or things exploding, she knows that maybe she needs to do a little more review on things. So I don't think that replaces written communication, but I think it does. I think the way she uses it is quite cool. And I could see why her students like it.
Yeah, I think you see V is commenting a teacher using memes and putting them on student papers.
Oh yeah. It's not limited to any one person for sure. Although what's interesting, I think I don't know if I'm seeing the same. I've seen the example that V is referring to, but I think every time I've seen people who do this, there's always kind of a different way they do it. Like it's not widely enough accepted that it's still a pretty idiosyncratic, personal, like everyone's got their own flavor of how they do it, which is nice. That reminds me of kind of learning technology used to be when it was still kind of a new thing and none of us really knew what we were doing. We kind of had to make it up as we went along. Like I think there's something I think there's something about learning there. In many ways, you know, I like courses like the one you're doing here. It's an inspiration to me because you're prepared to let some of those rough edges exist, and you're allowed to let each week be a bit of an adventure.
We didn't have any rough edges this week, did we, guys?
Other than the VGA cable, I had to laugh at that. I was trying to imagine how could this be hung up on a VGA cable?
It happens. Can you think of like a GIF that you've seen that just like made you go wow, or that really could make people like think different, not think differently, just something that was like really different, like
wow,
tough question. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and of course I won't have it on hand, so if I do think of one, I'm just going to describe it. There's a guy, I'll just name an artist who blows my mind. His name's Bill Domonokos. If you go to my blog, I use his images in a couple of my recent posts as the header image. He is really big on finding like old photographs from like the late 19th and early 20th century, or really old archival films, and they have a bit of a gothic weird edge. Like sometimes they're medical photos and stuff. And then he does really high-end artistic treatments of them. And there's just a sensibility to his work that blows my mind. Now, what does that communicate? I don't know, but I do find it kind of wild to be kind of like re-experiencing maybe 150-year-old media, you know, on my computer, and then being able to just take it and slap it, and then that sets the tone for my, like, his blog posts for me often work really well because, you know, you've been joking, you know, I'm going to be here to be a doom monger. I do write posts about stuff that freaks me out and scares me and is kind of dark, but I try to have a little bit of humor to it as well, or a little, not be just sheer unrelenting grim. So having like an image where, you know, maybe it's, you know, from a morgue in the late 19th century, but doing this strange, slightly uncanny bit of motion or atmosphere, it sets a tone for the article. And a lot of times when I'm struggling with a blog post, I'll like stop writing and I'll like go look for an image to kind of set the tone almost. It's like music almost. And then just to get back to it, like when I talk about GIFs being like such an old media, one of the things that's awesome about them, you don't need plugins to run them. You don't need any special media players. Like it's a really robust one. I'm actually kind of annoyed with Twitter and Giphy lately because they're kind of breaking to that ability to download the actual original source file. They run them through these MP4 engines and turn them into little videos and their own little proprietary players. Like, that really annoys me because I get why they do it from a network efficiency point of view. And if you're running a platform that big, I can see why they do it. But at the same time, one of the things I just loved about GIFs is how democratic they were. And I like being able to just grab it and know I can do whatever I want with it. I don't like having to like I still know how to do it, but now I have to go into the source code and find the secret back channel and run it through a little converter of my own, you know?
Right.
Like, that's stupid. Like, I can't tell people to do that.
We can't change that machine either.
Yeah. So anybody
else want to pipe in? Because like I feel like I've been doing all the talking. We had some people.
I feel like I've been talking
about museums.
Just reading these questions. That's right. When you mentioned WFMU, a lot of the physical class is based in New Jersey, right?
Yeah, they're in northern New Jersey. They're in Union, so they're pretty close.
New Jersey. WFMU is based in Jersey City. Anyway,
and they're in good shape now. They got a backer, right, for the Free Music Archive.
They gave up the Free Music Archive.
Okay.
They relinquished it, and it looked like it was going to be shuttered. But yeah, some company picked it. We'll see what happens there.
Okay.
I mean, it's better than it being shut down.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens to it. As of now, it's there and it works. The Free Music Archive is wonderful.
That's source of open license music and high end music that you can use for video projects.
Yeah, Creative Commons licensed music mostly. And yeah, they curate it. I think that's their big advantage. It's not like I can't upload my crappy music to it.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these open sites, you know, they don't really have any gatekeeping. And, you know, I mean, I'm all for having spaces with no gatekeeping, starting with our own blogs. But it's when you're looking for something good, it's nice that when somebody who's got good taste took time to actually try to identify good stuff and make recommendations. I mean, that stuff is very valuable to me.
Does anybody want to ask, like, you could ask Brian a dark question? Like,
I'm boring them. It's okay. I'm not offended.
we heard that
This is so much better than the class. I did my first class with students in Guadalajara yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So first of all, they said, yeah, you have to use our platform, the video platform. And I said, okay, can you send me a link? I said, well, it's not ready yet. And then so I got it on the weekend, my Moodle site. And it's supposed to have Big Blue Button attached to it. So Big Blue Button's not working. So I'm not going to wait till the day of. Who knows? Could be fine on Monday. Finally click it on. It's still not working. They go, we're working on it. We're working on it. Of course. And then they're not, you know. And I'm like, well, it's my first class. And then finally I say, screw this. So one of the things I do here is we have this thing called the Open Ed Tech Co-op. So thankfully I do have access to platforms and tools. So I spin up an instance of Mattermost, which is essentially an open source version of Slack, and Big Blue Button's in there. So I post a link to that on my Moodle page, tell people to go to it. So I create my own little video conference, and it takes people about 5 minutes to figure out how to connect, but that's, you know, normal. But then for my very first class, like instead of looking at what I'm seeing now, which are people's faces, there were 2 rooms with people, like, and it looked like they were sitting about 10 miles away from the camera. And I couldn't hear what they were saying because the microphone's on the other end of the room. And then it's like, okay, Brian, 3 hours, here's your first class.
Oh boy.
And first of all, I said, I'm not doing 3 hours. And then their English they're supposed to have English, but I mean, they're not confident in English. My Spanish is a joke. I mean, I can speak socially, but to try to teach. So of course, what do I do to compensate for, you know, I see these 2 dim windows with each room with about 10 bored people slumped in the back. No sign if they can even hear me. Every now and then I would just ask them to put their thumbs up if they were following what I said, and they would kind of go like this. It was so bad. But they were wonderful. I mean, so that's what I'm really looking for ways to break that rhythm up. So I've been telling them, we got to get away from this paradigm of them being in a room together. If I'm supposed to talk to them, that's just terrible. Anyway, that's more than you needed to know, but.
Well, it's kind of fitting because, I mean, the chat going on is like, you know, the future of museums if everything goes digital. And I mean, you're talking a little bit about the fidelity of social experiences. And, you know, question for anybody, like, you know, are we moving that far away from it for the things that this offers? You know, will we lose museums completely? I don't think we'll lose museums completely, but museums got to change. Schools got to change.
I mean, it's fantastic that I could even do that class in Mexico. I mean, so there's that, because there's not a lot of money involved with this. This isn't like some big project. I mean, this is someone who asked me to teach a class. VR museums, LOL. There are lots of them. That's the thing.
But yeah, is it the same? Are you a fan of virtual reality, Brian?
I'm having a flashback to the first time I saw you put on VR goggles, where you were making smart ass remarks, and then I have video of this, and then you put the goggles on, and then after 5 seconds you're going, whoa, this is so great. It's like, it took literally 3 seconds for you to become a convert. I think it's interesting for what it's interesting here, because there's instructors and things like that who hear about it and who are interested in it. And there's certainly some really good stuff, like some of the products that have been made. I've done the one where, has anyone here done I think it's a fairly common thing for the Oculus Rift, where you get in, they put you in an elevator, and then you walk out on this plank outside of a building, and then you look down and you can see is anyone? Yeah, V looks like she's done it.
What was it like, V? Tell us.
Yeah, I'd like to hear another point of view.
I'll unmute now. Okay. Frightening.
Did you jump the first time?
I'm sorry?
Did you jump the first time? Did you step off the plank?
No, but someone else was somebody else, but not me. I was terrified.
Like, that's powerful, right? Like, you know you're not going to die, right?
Right.
But you still didn't want to do it.
No, I didn't want to.
I think that's really interesting. I mean,
my boyfriend made me. I'm scared of heights. I didn't want to do it.
The first time I did it, for me, it was like I knew I wouldn't die, but I also knew that my brain could be tricked into something, and I was more worried about literally just falling to the ground and hitting my head on the floor or something. Like, I thought that was likely. I didn't think I was going to fall 30 stories to my death. But I thought, I could, it was definitely a real enough experience that I could see myself think it was real. I did fall the second time. I got my courage up the second time.
All right, so before Brian goes, I want to hear everybody say whether they say GIF or GIFs, just so we can take a poll here to see where we sit on the spectrum. GIF or GIF? Okay, Christina.
GIF.
1G. Janet, GIF or GIF? Is it pronounced GIF?
I say GIF.
Okay.
GIF.
All right, we got 3.
Oh.
All right, Kelly and Carol?
GIF. I wanted to leave the classroom when you said GIF.
Oh, wait! If the feelings were that strong, I wish someone had said that at the beginning.
Don't worry.
I didn't want to drive people out.
Carol, where are you on the spectrum?
He's a GIF.
Now there's a lot of pressure going on. Mary Kate, where are you?
GIF. GIF.
What?
There's no peanut butter in this room.
This is. I wonder if this is a generational thing.
Yeah, it could be. Well, I don't know. I mean,
that graphic starts as a GIF.
It's a graphic image format, not a graphic image format.
Thank you.
That is a sound grammatical argument that Kelly made.
When I hear GIF, I think of peanut butter, so I can't.
It's out of control because there was that article with the guy who invented it, and supposedly he did say it was soft, but the argument goes on; it never ends.
So I like to think that GIFs or GIFs, they're silly. I'm going to start saying GIFs just out of respect for the room. Sorry. The thing about GIFs is that it's something that seems silly, but that can actually be quite powerful. And we didn't even get into explainer GIFs, like things that show a mechanical process or a formula or simple math things. Like, we use those all the time. The idea of just a simple looping, repeating demonstration can actually be very powerful for certain types of concepts. So I like to think of GIFs as that thing. It seems like it starts as a silly thing, and then you find out there's actually a lot there. And when you think about the GIF versus GIF debate, you're kind of like a really core epistemic conflict, because Kelly was right. Graphic interchanged format. So that's why you should say GIF. That's absolutely correct. But then the person who actually invented the format says, no, I say GIF. So do you favor that kind of subjective human order of knowledge, or do you believe in kind of grammatical rules and intellectual consistency? Kind of like objectivism versus subjectivism.
That was beautiful, and it's not his anymore, right?
That's very true.
Years ago, so that was really great, Brian. I really appreciate you taking the time to visit class, and thank everybody else for putting up with our technical hoo-has here.
I just want to say again, people do follow this class, and I certainly do, and I look in on it, and it's an inspiration to me. I love the work that's been done in the past, and again, what I'm seeing now. And it was a real treat to join you. It really was. I've been looking forward to it, and I'm just honored and to have been asked, and really happy to join you. So I hope it didn't feel like a waste of time to the group, and thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Brian. And I'm going to click the stop broadcast button.